week 3 of the fantasy baseball season. Here's a few prospects I would watch this week, and possibly these players come up sooner than later. First prospect, Max Clark of the Detroit Tigers, the number 8 prospect overall in Major League Baseball. And this Tiger team, we know they need some help in the corner outfield position, and Clark, their number 1 prospect in their system as well. And we saw Kevin McCongley make the opening day roster. So far, Clark tearing it up in the minors. No home runs, 7 RBIs in the early going, 5 stolen bases, a whopping .405 batting average, and a .481 on base percentage and 42 at bats. So I think Clark, he could be up sooner than later. And like I said earlier, they didn't have any problem calling up top prospect early in the season is this Detroit Tiger team, and why not call up another top prospect? He's already in AAA. I know he's only 21 years old, but these guys, they're well seasoned nowadays out of the draft, and they come up within a year or two. So right now, like I said, he's the number 1 prospect in the Tiger system. Lefty bat, he can do a little bit of everything. Is Max Clark, where he has the 5-tool capability for this Tiger team. And like I said, this is a contending Tiger team, and they could use help in the corner outfield. And with him hitting .405 in the early going, I think he's someone definitely to keep an eye on. Could be up sooner than later, and he's out there in 94% of fantasy leagues. Next prospect, Colt Emerson of the Seattle Mariners. So Colt Emerson, he was on the list last week. He makes it once again. And like I said, he got a big contract, and he didn't even appear in the major leagues yet, signing an 8-year, $95 million deal. And then we saw a couple weeks later, Connor Griffin getting a 9-year, $140 million deal, where he's only been in the big leagues for a week. So far, in the early going this season in AAA for Emerson, 1 homer, 5 RBIs, 2 stolen bases, 5 runs scored, .308 batting average, a .341 on base percentage for Emerson. So like I said, he's number 7 prospect in all Major League Baseball. They gave him the nice contract. I think he's going to be up sooner than later, even though he's only 20 years old. And he's the number 1 prospect in the Seattle Mariners system. And he's actually owned in 13% of leagues, but still out there in 87% of leagues. So this Mariners team, they're struggling mightily in the early going, hitting the baseball, maybe calling up Emerson sooner than later to jolt this offense. Cal Riley, he's definitely struggling. Julio Rodriguez, he's usually off to slow starts every season. He's having a bad year as well. So I think adding Emerson to this lineup to maybe get those guys going and bringing energy over here to Seattle. And like I said, they're paying him the big bucks before he even debuted. So I think Emerson, it wouldn't be surprising me if he's up in a couple weeks or in the beginning of May. Next prospect, Jonah Tung of the New York Mets. So Jonah Tung, he had a cup of coffee last season in the major leagues with the Mets. They were desperate for starting pitching, and I think Tung, he wasn't ready for the New York Mets yet, where he went out there pretty much like a deer in the headlights at times and couldn't get things going. His teammate Nolan McLean came up a couple weeks before Tung, and he went out there and he had a good first 8 starts of his career. So Tung last season, 18 2/3, 2-3 record, 22 Ks, a 7.71 ERA, 1.77 WHIP on the season. So obviously it was a small sample size. He was called up in August. It was Jonah Tung. He definitely has high K capabilities. And this New York Met team, right now, David Peterson, he's struggling in the rotation. He's a free agent after the season, where obviously they don't know what much is this New York Met team. If Peterson, let's say, gets bummed 1 or 2 more times, definitely could be a possibility where the Mets put him in the bullpen and Jonah Tung gets called up to the major leagues. If Kodai Senga goes down with injury, which we've seen a lot throughout his major league career for Kodai Senga, then Jonah Tung, he could be up. So right now, he's definitely dropped the prospect board a little bit from last season to this year. 45th prospect overall, where he was in the top 10 last season, but he's still the number 1 prospect in the Mets system, where obviously Carson Bench was coming into the year, but obviously he's on the major league roster, even though he's struggling mightily in the early going. So like I said, Jonah Tung, he's in AAA. He had the experience last season, 22 2/3, and so far this year in AAA, 0-1 record, 5.06 ERA, 3 games started, 13 Ks, and opponent's batting average is only 154 against them in the 10 2/3. So 1 bad outing Jonah Tung had down there. But like I said, if David Peterson continues to struggle, or if someone goes down with injury, Jonah Tung, in my opinion, will be the next man up, unless Tobias Myers is really stretched out and they put him in the rotation. But I think this New York Met team, they like what they saw from Tung. He was untouchable in trade talks in the offseason, and I think he could be up sooner than later if one of those things, like I mentioned, happen, and he's available right now in 94% of fantasy leagues. Next prospect, Noah Schultz of the Chicago White Sox. So Schultz, I thought last season he was going to be up for the Chicago White Sox team, and obviously that wasn't the case. He was banged up with injury a little bit, and the White Sox team was going nowhere. So they thought get another year of control by keeping him down in the minors. But we saw opening day starter Shane Smith get sent down to the minors, and we know this White Sox team, they're not going to go anywhere once again this season. And Noah Schultz, he's off to a roaring start, and he is in AAA, so he's right on the brink of coming up sooner than later. I think in a couple weeks as well, with the beginning of May. So on the year for Schultz, 3-0 record, 1.29 ERA in 2 games started in 14 innings, 19 strikeouts, and opponent's batting average in the early going, hitting under 100. So this kid, he's got electric stuff. He's a big lefty. Is Noah Schultz at 6'10", 240, and this guy, he could be like a Garrett Crochet type possibly. Just obviously he's got to get the control and command down, but he throws hard, big strikeout pitcher. And like I said, this White Sox team, they needed rotation help for many seasons, especially after they traded Garrett Crochet a couple of seasons ago to the Boston Red Sox. So Schultz, he's out there 97% of fantasy leagues, the number 46 prospect overall in Major League Baseball. And like I said, this White Sox team, Shane Smith, they sent down recently, they need rotation help, and I think Schultz, a couple more decent outings in the minors, he'll be up in no time for this White Sox team. So definitely an intriguing prospect to watch. And the final prospect, Jackson Wiggins of the Chicago Cubs. So we know Cade Horton, who was one of the top prospects in Major League Baseball over the last few seasons, he's out for the season with injury. We saw Matthew Boyd, he went on the IL. And right now, Colin Ray, he's filled in one of the rotation spots, and I think one of these other rotation spots are up for grabs. So Jackson Wiggins, already 24 years old, I think the clock's ticking for him to come up and pitch for this Chicago Cub team. And I know he struggled in college in his first 2 seasons with a 6.17 ERA and had Tommy John surgery, but right now he is the 55th prospect overall in Major League Baseball. Towering right-hander, 6'6", 225, and so far this season he's off to a bad start though. 2 games started, 8 innings, 5.63 ERA, 10 strikeouts. But like I said, with the injuries piling up pretty quickly over there in Chicago, and already with Cade Horton out for the season, it wouldn't be surprising to me if Jackson Wiggins is up sooner than later for this Cub team. Right now he's out there in 99% of fantasy leagues, out there in every fantasy league, and he's moved up the ranking boards pretty quickly. Is Jackson Wiggins, and with injuries he could be up sooner than later, because if one more guy goes down, I think Wiggins, he's going to be up for the Chicago Cub team, where they don't have much obviously in the minors of the pitching position besides him, where he's already in AAA as well, where he's on the brink. So right now, I think out of these 5 guys I named, I think there's a good chance in the next month to 6 weeks that 4 or 5 of these guys could be up in the major leagues, and they're definitely amongst the top 100 prospects in Major League Baseball. So if you need some prospects, and if you got an NA spot to stash 1 or 2 of these guys, I actually would. So that's a few prospects I would watch for week 3 of the fantasy baseball season.